I had this setting out from yesterday, but note that I had it kind of wrapped like that. I also did the same thing to that one. Please come over and just feel how they feel. But I think that's really important to know the stage of that one's definitely stiffer. That's the stacked one. That's definitely not as stiff, right? But I definitely, like, the rim is still pretty damp, but it's not flexible, okay? I don't want this to collapse. That's a big thing. I'm not as worried about this collapsing because, again, it's not holding any weight. I will be more concerned about this collapsing with the last piece that I'm adding. So I'm pretty sure this is still really attached. If you threw on a bat that is not plastic, you may want to put clay tabs here as though you're trimming, just to make sure that that is fully adhered. Serrated rib really comes in helpful in this process. I can't say enough about getting one. It'll really, because I'll be using this for a bit, not just to score and slip the top of this. And you'll kind of see all that. So I'm scoring and slipping the other piece. Remember, that has no base, so I don't care that it dropped in there. So I know I'm like making you sit through this portion of the demonstration, but I am doing more than just one scoring and slipping of each. All right. I did not wire cut this, right? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to place it on of how it looks even to me. Now what I have to do is I have to make sure it's centered. You can do this with your needle tool, same as if you'd be centering a piece. If it's not centered, you're going to have to lift it up and move it this way. So it does take a little bit of time. Make sure it's fully centered though. It will be way more difficult if you don't fully center it. All right, I'm going to give this some light taps to kind of try and get it a little more adhered. I'm going to take this. This is why it's really important to give this a good cut. If you don't cut into that base of the second one and give yourself a nice undercut in order for this wire to go into, it's going to be more difficult. So now I'm holding the bat with my thumbs and I'm dragging back with the tool. So I'm not just pulling. You don't want to have so much stress. And then that comes off. All right, hopefully you're going to be able to get your hand in. Sometimes at this point, you may want to just turn off your wheel, okay? Because you have this stacked now. Now what you got to do, and what I like to do is I like to use this. So I'm going to start kind of blending these two together just lightly with this tool. That serrated rib allows there to start being material kind of pulled from one to the other. So notice I'm going 45 degrees in one direction, 45 degrees in the other direction. And my inside hand is just along that inner seam. If it was that the one form was way larger than the other form, I mean, not way larger, but let's say there's a little bit of an overlap, like there's an undercut, I would probably do a reinforced coil first to kind of fill that space and then do my rib tooling. Make sure this is really soft clay. Again, put your hand supporting on that interior. and press it in as you go. So you're not putting a huge amount of material on here. I'm back with this. At times I like to wet this now. Now, I'm going to just use the serrated rib on the interior connection. Just to make sure it's like really together. It depends on the form that I do. This one is going to have this neck to it and everything, and the likelihood you're not going to be able to see it at all. It's going to be so shadowed that I'm probably not going to pay too much attention to it. If it was more of an open form, I definitely would make sure that it looks fully refined. I might do some of that though via like trimming tool. I'm going away from serrated rib. I'm gonna go more towards metal rib and sponge. And it is not that I'm pouring water into this. God, it is acting so strange. So I'm hydrating the seam. Just with my sponge. Wet your arm, because a dry arm that hits this is going to yank the whole thing. So what I'm kind of doing is I'm throwing sort of, I'm not really throwing, I'm just pushing downward and upward. I'm also kind of erasing throwing lines, and as this clay hydrates, you could start feeling that I'm actually kind of just moving clay a little, sealing up that joint, kind of really making sure that's clean and refined. When I need to rehydrate that seam, I go back in. I'm just holding the sponge up against the seam. And then I'm moving it up and then lower from the seam. So it's looking pretty good. Okay, so now, do I want to make any changes up here? So I'm not dripping water into the interior. All I'm doing is hydrating this clay. I'm also preparing it for its next connection. I'm preparing the surface for its next connection. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. If your material is way too hard, you can wrap it with some wet paper towels for a little bit and then come back and then be able to possibly throw it or change its form slightly. I'm not looking to do a huge throw here. What I'm looking to do is probably just kind of curve this in a little, maybe lessen a little bit of the weight, but it takes time to get that clay hydrated back. So by me lightly putting pressure on the piece by hydrating it a lot with my sponge, by wrapping my hand around it and giving it time. I can slowly start pulling it and giving myself this wall area that was probably a little too thick. Now I might decide, which I'm probably gonna do, I'm probably just gonna cut a lot of this. Because remember the last time I did this demonstration, I said to you guys, I was like, I should probably just rethrow that other form. It's way too bottom heavy. I mean, there's so much more clay here. This is also like a nice thing that if let's say my height requirement was done, right? 2 forms. Well, now I can really fine tune that top to make it exactly what I want. But my height requirement isn't done. So even if I pull all this, pretty sure I'm still not gonna get my height requirement. So this is coming off instead. And what I'm gonna do, that's better. I'm gonna bring this in. That's better, because now I'm gonna be able to probably cut this a little bit more and set myself up for what I want for the neck. Before I do any of that, I'm gonna make sure that I clean off any slurry from this piece because it has to go in front of the fan. And I need to start letting it dry, at least this top part. What I am gonna do is I'm gonna plastic wrap, probably here down, cover it in plastic, so this is the only area that dries anymore. If I let everything dry, there's no way that I'm going to be able to trim this form. So my next piece will be thrown upside down again. I have a little bit more flexibility. All right, this one again, I'm gonna put it down. This one's way more tricky to do centered, right? Because it's not, that one's so obvious. This one's not as obvious. It's hitting there. Turn that line to me. Erase the line. Pretty close. That's pretty close. I'm pretty satisfied with that. I feel like it's sitting a little bit on a tip. That's why. Some people even do like a slight sealing with this on. Because right now it's trapped air, right? It's super cool because it's trapped air. So a lot of times, like if you see potters do this on, I don't know if they do this on Instagram, man, I don't know. But they might keep this here. Huh? Then they might keep that on there. Because again, it's trapped air. So any pressure that I put on it, it's not going to be as reactive. I don't tend to do this because I like to hold on the other end. So that's me. I mean, there's just a million different ways to do this by how you kind of just like working. So again, I'm going to make sure that wire's there. Then I'm going to put my thumbs here. And then I'm going to pull. Sometimes when I'm doing a neck form like this, I'm a little wary about doing so much like blending because it's not really under stress or anything. So the likelihood of it kind of separating is very unlikely. This, more. And I don't really want a visual interruption. So I usually just really make sure that's fully attached, like interior and exterior. A lot of times if I add a coil, it's really small. So I'm hydrating the interior. Making sure that's fully hydrated, like so my hand isn't sticking at all. That definitely like made it a little bit more balanced in the neck, which is great.